The startup showcase was supposed to be my moment of triumph. After months of coding 18-hour days in my cramped apartment, I was finally presenting my social media analytics platform to a room full of venture capitalists at the Austin Tech Summit. The demo had gone flawlessly. 3 investors had already requested follow-up meetings, and TechCrunch was live tweeting my presentation. At 29, I was about to join the ranks of funded founders who'd made it past the brutal early-stage gauntlet. My girlfriend Jessica was sitting in the front row, beaming with what I thought was pride. She'd been my biggest supporter throughout the development process, helping me refine my pitch deck, networking with her marketing contacts, and even suggesting features that made it into the final product. We'd been together for 3 years, living together for the past year in my one-bedroom place near downtown. Jessica was everything I'd thought I wanted. Ambitious, intelligent, worked as a brand strategist for a prestigious agency, and constantly pushed me to think bigger about my future. I was backstage, still riding the adrenaline high from nailing my presentation, when my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. I expected congratulations, maybe excitement about the celebration dinner we'd planned, or at least a heart emoji. Instead, I got a termination notice. Watched your whole presentation. Honestly, embarrassing. This isn't the unicorn company we talked about building together. Small vision, small execution, small thinking. I can't waste my prime years on someone whose content being mediocre. Either level up to my standards, or I'm leveling out of this relationship. I stared at the screen while investors and journalists buzzed around me, my post-pitch euphoria evaporating like morning fog. This wasn't a girlfriend celebrating her boyfriend's milestone. This was a disappointed venture capitalist delivering a performance review to an underperforming portfolio company. The message wasn't even signed with love or an emoji. It was a corporate directive delivered via text, cold and calculating. Suddenly, all the little warning signs I'd been ignoring snapped into crystal clear focus. Her parents, Michael and Sandra, always asking about my exit strategy at dinner parties, as if my life were a business plan requiring their approval. Her brother Ryan constantly name-dropping friends whose startups had been acquired for 9 figures, wondering aloud why I wasn't playing in the big leagues. Jessica's casual mentions of her sorority sisters whose boyfriends were pulling down 7-figure salaries, delivered with just enough edge to feel like performance metrics I was failing to meet. I wasn't a partner in her eyes. I was an investment that wasn't generating acceptable returns. My thumbs moved with surgical precision as I typed back, "Message received. Consider this my exit strategy." Then I switched my phone to airplane mode and went back to the networking reception, where people actually saw value in what I'd built. The rest of the evening passed in a surreal bubble of professional validation and personal devastation. I closed preliminary deals with 2 VCs, got quoted in 3 tech blogs, and exchanged business cards with founders who wanted to collaborate. But underneath the surface-level success, I was running calculations on a completely different kind of business model, the systematic dissolution of a 3-year relationship. That night, instead of going home to the apartment Jessica and I shared, an apartment where only my name was on the lease I should mention, I checked into a boutique hotel near the convention center. I sat on the edge of the king-size bed, still wearing my presentation clothes, and began executing my own strategic pivot. Phase 1, digital infrastructure separation. I logged into our shared Google Drive, where we'd been collaborating on what Jessica liked to call our power couple empire-building documents. I downloaded my files, revoked her access permissions, and changed every password. Our joint Spotify account, shared Netflix subscription, meal delivery services, everything. It was a digital divorce executed with the same methodical efficiency I'd used to debug my platform's code. Phase 2, physical asset reallocation. I called a 24-hour moving and storage company, scheduling them for 7 a.m. sharp. Then I sent an email to my building's property management, informing them that my girlfriend had voluntarily terminated her residency, and I'd be updating the smart lock access codes the following day, as permitted under my lease agreement. I attached a screenshot of her text message with no additional commentary. Her words provided all the context necessary. Phase 3, emotional systems audit. This was the most challenging component. I sat in that sterile hotel room and let the silence wash over me like code compilation. The pain was definitely there, a persistent background process consuming mental resources, but it wasn't heartbreak. It was the sharp sting of realizing I'd been systematically devalued by someone whose opinion I'd trusted implicitly. They didn't see me as a person building something meaningful from scratch. They saw me as a disappointing stock pick that had failed to deliver expected returns. Fine, time to rebalance my portfolio. The next morning, professional movers and I executed a flawless extraction operation. We packed Jessica's designer wardrobe, her collection of business development books, her expensive skincare arsenal, and the various smart home gadgets she'd insisted were essential for our executive lifestyle. I left everything neatly organized in labeled boxes in the building's secure package room, then had the concierge send her a pickup notification with tracking numbers. By noon, I'd reconfigured my living space and was back online, fielding investor calls and media interview requests. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since I'd reactivated it, but I was busy capitalizing on the momentum from yesterday's successful launch. The message barrage started around 2 p.m. Where are all my things? The door code isn't working anymore. Jake, this is incredibly immature. Did you seriously change the HBO Max password? I have important client calls to take from the apartment. I maintained radio silence. I was in back-to-back investor meetings, and my company's valuation was climbing with each conversation. The escalation protocol activated exactly 60 hours after my initial response. My phone rang with a blocked number. I let it route to voicemail, then received a text from Jessica's mother, Sandra. Jake, this childish tantrum has gone on quite long enough. Your little demonstration of wounded ego has been duly noted. Michael and I are prepared to facilitate mediation between you and Jessica. Let's schedule a meeting to discuss reconciliation terms. Reconciliation terms. Like I was a subsidiary that had violated the conditions of a merger agreement. I screenshotted the message and replied, "No mediation necessary." The partnership has been dissolved per Jessica's explicit specifications. All the best. 7 minutes later, Michael called. I answered immediately. "Jake," he said, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he used during hostile takeover negotiations. "You're going to terminate this ridiculous behavior right now. You've made your point about being upset. Now you're going to apologize to Jessica for this juvenile display, and we can all proceed like rational adults." I leaned back in my desk chair, gazing out at the Austin skyline through my office window. "I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding, Michael. I'm not displaying anything. I'm executing on Jessica's clearly communicated directive. She terminated our partnership agreement. I accepted her terms and conditions." Sputtering sounds emerged from the phone. That was an emotional outburst during a stressful moment. Jessica is passionate about excellence. Jessica isn't an emotional person, I interrupted, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet register. She's strategic and analytical. You taught her those skills. She presented me with a clear business proposition. Level up to her standards or level out of the relationship. I chose to level out. This is the logical result of that decision. Extended silence. Then his voice shifted, losing the bluster and acquiring a menacing edge. You're in possession of property that belongs to her, valuable items with significant sentimental and professional worth. Don't imagine for a second that we won't recover them through appropriate legal channels. I almost smiled. Anything you believe is wrongfully retained can be addressed through proper legal procedures. Please send me a detailed, itemized list. I'll have my legal counsel review it thoroughly. I didn't actually have legal counsel yet, but he didn't need that information. I terminated the call before he could respond. They'd just telegraphed their next strategic move, and I needed to prepare comprehensive defensive measures. The counteroffensive launched faster than I'd anticipated. I'd seriously underestimated their operational tempo and resource allocation. Ryan materialized at my office building on Tuesday afternoon. He'd somehow social engineered his way past building security by claiming to be a courier with time-sensitive legal documents requiring my personal signature and biometric verification. A simple but effective infiltration technique that worked because he looked the part. Professional attire, confident demeanor, and an official-looking envelope with my name printed on law firm letterhead. He didn't storm into my workspace. He strolled in like he was conducting a due diligence inspection, hands casually in his pockets, surveying my startup's modest office setup with obvious disdain and barely concealed superiority. "Jake," he said, settling into the chair across from my standing desk like he was claiming territory. "Interesting little operation you've assembled here. Thanks for the feedback," I replied, not looking up from my laptop where I was reviewing term sheet negotiations with 3 different venture capital firms. "What can I do for you today?" You can stop playing destructive games with my sister's emotional and professional well-being. I stopped typing and made direct eye contact. I'm not playing anything. I'm building a technology company. He leaned forward, adopting a concerned brother posture. Jessica is absolutely devastated. You humiliated her in front of her entire professional network. People throughout the Austin tech scene are talking about this situation. Talking about what specifically? About how you dumped her via text message immediately after she tried to provide constructive feedback about your presentation performance. I blinked slowly. Is that the narrative you're constructing? It's an accurate description of what occurred. I picked up my phone, navigated to Jessica's message, and read it aloud word for word. Watched your whole presentation. Honestly, embarrassing. This isn't the unicorn company we talked about building together. Small vision, small execution, small thinking. I can't waste my prime years on someone whose content being mediocre. Either level up to my standards or I'm leveling out of this relationship. Ryan's jaw muscles tightened visibly. She was attempting to motivate you toward your full potential. By threatening to terminate our relationship if I didn't meet her performance benchmarks. By challenging you to achieve excellence instead of settling for mediocrity. I opened my phone's voice memo application and placed it prominently on the desk between us, the red recording indicator clearly visible. In Texas, as long as recording devices are in plain sight and obvious, it constitutes consensual documentation. Ryan's eyes tracked to the phone, and his body language shifted into a more cautious configuration. Here's the situation, he continued, his tone becoming more measured and calculated. You're currently in possession of Jessica's laptop computer. That device contains confidential client files and proprietary work product belonging to her agency. She requires immediate return of that equipment. The MacBook Pro that she specifically requested I purchase for her birthday celebration, the one that's registered to my Apple ID and was paid for with my personal credit card. She's been utilizing it for professional purposes. Those files represent her intellectual property and confidential client information. Then, she should have implemented proper backup protocols to her own cloud storage infrastructure. Ryan stood up abruptly, his diplomatic facade finally fragmenting. Don't be a vindictive asshole about this situation, Jake. Return the laptop, issue a public apology for embarrassing her, and maybe we can negotiate a path forward. What kind of path forward? Jessica might be willing to give you another opportunity. She could help you think bigger, connect you with influential people in her network. She has access to contacts and resources you could never reach independently. The audacity was absolutely breathtaking. They weren't just attempting to recover assets. They were magnanimously offering to readmit me as a charity case into their ecosystem. No, I said with complete finality. Ryan stared at me incredulously. No. The laptop contains my personal files and development work and was purchased with my funds. Jessica is welcome to retrieve any work files she properly backed up to her own accounts. As for thinking bigger, I closed a series of term sheet yesterday worth $2.3 million. My thinking is appropriately scaled. His face flushed red with anger and frustration. You think you're incredibly clever, don't you? Running to investors, playing the victim card. We know exactly what you're doing here. What am I doing? Trying to destroy Jessica's reputation because you can't handle honest professional feedback. I gestured toward my phone, still actively recording our conversation. I'm documenting our interaction because you're in my office making demands about property that doesn't legally belong to you or your family. Ryan looked at the recording device, then back at me, his brain apparently unable to process my complete lack of emotional reaction or defensive behavior. He finally shook his head in disgust and walked toward the exit, muttering something about me being a manipulative sociopath. That evening, I received an email from my building's management company. Jessica had filed a formal complaint alleging that I had illegally locked her out of the apartment and was wrongfully withholding property, including essential work equipment and irreplaceable family heirlooms. The phrase, irreplaceable family heirlooms, triggered an immediate cold spike of dread in my chest. I drove straight to my apartment and went directly to my bedroom closet, where I kept a small fireproof safe containing my most valuable possessions. My hands were trembling slightly as I entered the 6-digit combination. Empty. My grandfather's vintage Omega Speedmaster was gone. The watch he'd worn during his service in Vietnam, the one he'd given me at my college graduation, the timepiece I'd proudly shown Jessica during one of our early dates when we were sharing family stories. She'd been fascinated by its history, asking detailed questions about its provenance and sentimental value. The theft hadn't been impulsive or opportunistic. It had been methodically planned and executed. Before the movers arrived, before I'd even made the decision to end our relationship, she must have accessed my safe and taken the one item she knew was truly irreplaceable to me. For the first time since receiving her text message, my carefully maintained composure completely shattered. The anger, white-hot and consuming, finally erupted through my professional facade. They'd fundamentally misunderstood my methodical approach, mistaking strategic thinking for emotional weakness. They were catastrophically wrong. They wanted to escalate this conflict into total warfare. Perfect. But I wasn't going to fight using their preferred tactics of emotional manipulation and social pressure. I was going to deploy documentation, evidence, and the precise application of legal and financial leverage. They thought I was small-time and mediocre. They were about to discover exactly how much systematic damage a well-funded startup founder could inflict when properly motivated and adequately resourced. My comprehensive counteroffensive launched simultaneously across 4 strategic fronts: legal, corporate, social, and financial. Legal front, I retained Morrison & Associates, a law firm specializing in intellectual property theft and white-collar crime. The retainer was expensive, but my Series A funding had just closed, and this was a legitimate business expense for protecting company assets. We filed criminal charges for grand theft and a civil lawsuit for recovery of stolen property. The documentation was federal court quality, complete with forensic evidence and witness statements. Corporate front, I contacted Jessica's agency through my attorney, informing them that one of their employees had committed theft and was using company resources to harass a client's business partner. I provided copies of Ryan's office visit, the building management complaint, and the documented pattern of escalating contact from her family members. Corporate HR departments are pathologically risk-averse, and an employee using company equipment for personal vendettas represented exactly the kind of liability exposure they'd want to eliminate immediately. Social front, this required the most delicate execution. I didn't engage in public mudslinging or post angry social media rants. I simply told the truth, calmly and without embellishment, when people in the Austin tech community asked about the situation. The relationship ended when Jessica sent me a message saying she couldn't waste her prime years on someone content being mediocre, I'd explained matter-of-factly. So I took her advice and removed the mediocrity from her life by removing myself. Turned out to be excellent timing. I closed my Series A the next day. The unvarnished honesty was more devastating than any character assassination campaign. There was no effective defense against it because it consisted entirely of their own documented words and actions. Financial front, I leveraged my new investor relationships to ensure Jessica's agency lost several potential tech startup clients. Not through explicit badmouthing, but simply by sharing my experience when asked for vendor recommendations. Word travels fast in Austin's tight-knit startup ecosystem, and reputation is everything in the service industry. The reaction was swift and volcanic. Michael called me, absolutely apoplectic with rage. "A criminal lawsuit? Are you seriously pressing charges against my daughter?" "I'm recovering stolen property through appropriate legal channels, Michael," I said, visualizing him pacing frantically around his home office. "It's a straightforward business transaction. You of all people should appreciate proper legal procedures. We'll bury you in legal fees and countersuit for harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress." "Please proceed," I said, allowing genuine amusement to creep into my voice for the first time. "The discovery process will be absolutely fascinating. I've preserved all digital communications. Have you?" The line went dead immediately. Jessica's professional life imploded with remarkable speed. Her agency, faced with potential criminal liability and negative publicity, quietly reassigned her to a reduced role handling small local accounts instead of major tech clients. The Austin startup community was surprisingly small and interconnected, and word traveled at light speed about the marketing strategist who'd tried to extort a successful founder. The criminal case proceeded with bureaucratic efficiency. Jessica's court-appointed attorney attempted to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested in reduced charges. They wanted to establish a precedent that would deter other relationship-based theft schemes. The civil trial was almost anticlimactic in its one-sidedness. I arrived wearing a simple navy suit, carrying a single organized folder containing all my evidence. They deployed a full legal team: Michael, Sandra, Jessica, Ryan, and two expensive attorneys who looked like they specialized in white-collar defense. When my turn came to present evidence, I kept the presentation clinical and factual. Here's the safe where I stored my grandfather's watch. Here are photographs of me wearing it at family events over the past 5 years. Here's the receipt for the laptop, purchased with my personal credit card. And here's the text message that initiated this entire sequence of events. I read Jessica's message aloud to the judge, a no-nonsense woman who'd clearly presided over every possible variation of relationship drama and financial disputes. When their legal team argued that the items were gifts given during the relationship and that Jessica's message was taken out of context, the judge looked directly at Jessica with obvious skepticism. "Miss Rodriguez, did you remove the watch from Mr. Brown's personal safe?" Jessica's eyes darted toward her mother before responding. "It was a gift. He told me I could have it someday." "Is that accurate, Mr. Brown?" "No, Your Honor. It was my grandfather's military service watch. It's been in my family for 3 generations and was never intended as a gift." The judge reviewed all the evidence methodically, examined the text message transcript, and didn't require detective work to piece together the obvious narrative. She ruled in my favor on all counts, ordering immediate return of all property plus punitive damages for the theft and harassment. Their defeat was absolute and humiliatingly public. In the harsh fluorescent lighting of the courtroom, their sophisticated maneuvering looked exactly like what it was: a petty criminal shakedown by people who couldn't accept that their investment in me hadn't generated the returns they demanded. Michael had to physically restrain Ryan from arguing with the judge's final decision. I walked out of the courthouse without saying a word to any of them. 1 week later, a bonded courier delivered a package to my office. Inside was my grandfather's Omega Speedmaster, the MacBook Pro, and a cashier's check covering the full damage award. There was no accompanying note or message. I used a portion of the settlement money to upgrade my office space to a full floor and hire 3 additional senior developers, a genuine scale-up operation. The last intelligence I received indicated that Jessica had moved back into her parents' house after her agency quietly terminated her employment during a strategic restructuring. Her reputation in Austin's technology scene was permanently damaged. People don't trust manipulators, especially when they're so blatantly transactional about personal relationships. I received one final communication from her 8 months later, sent through LinkedIn at 3:17 a.m. "Saw the TechCrunch feature about your Series B funding round. $15 million valuation. I guess my feedback worked after all. You should thank me for pushing you to think bigger and achieve your potential." I read the message and felt something completely unexpected: genuine pity. She would never understand that authentic success built on personal vision was fundamentally different from success achieved by meeting someone else's arbitrary standards. She'd forever remain the hero of her own revisionist narrative, the architect of my achievements, the victim of my unreasonable refusal to accept her guidance and superior judgment. She'd learned absolutely nothing from the experience. I deleted the message without responding. I had a company to build, employees to hire, and a vision to execute. My own vision, not one dictated by someone else's definition of success and mediocrity. My stock was indeed soaring, but more importantly, I was the sole shareholder.